Lauren Mayk. Welcome to Battleground Politics. Pennsylvania Democrats will be heading into the 2026 midterm election year with a new state party chair. Earlier this month, at a meeting in Lancaster, the party chose Eugene DePasquale as its new chair. He's a former Auditor General and former state representative. He replaces State Senator Sharif Street, who stepped down as party chair after declaring he's running for Congress to try to replace Congressman Dwight Evans, who is retiring. Street is one of several candidates in that race. The new Pennsylvania State Democratic Party Chair, Eugene DePasquale, joins us now. Welcome. Thanks for joining us.
No, Warren, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Before we get into some of the politics of Pennsylvania, I first want to get your reaction to the assassination of Charlie Kirk and ask what you could do to help address the political violence that we are seeing in this country.
Look, he's a dad. First of all, I want to say this. It's completely unacceptable. It's tragic. It's a dad who is assassinated beyond just a political figure. It's a son, someone that had friends and family. And we all have to do our part to turn down the rhetoric. Look, we can have a battle of ideas, that's fine, but this is completely unacceptable. Anyone, whether it's one individual or more who are part of this, need to be held fully responsible to the law. And all of us in public life need to do our part to tone down the rhetoric and make sure that we are having a competing battle for ideas and not doing anything to try to endanger anyone's personal safety.
As you are taking over as the head of the Democratic Party in Pennsylvania, where we also saw an attack on the governor's residence, how do you cultivate a change? Who do you have those conversations with? Where does it start?
So first of all, you're right. I mean, this is, there was Minnesota lawmakers recently. The governor, clearly there was an assassination attempt on our own governor. There was an assassination attempt on President Trump. There was even, Nancy Pelosi's husband. The list is now getting, first of all, one is too many, but the list is getting longer and it's tragic every time. I and you and others cannot control what other people do, but we can control what we do. And I think we've all got to do our part to do what we can. That is, when we know someone is, to be blunt, politically engaged in going to that nth degree, we need to do our part to try to pull them back. If we see someone that's getting dangerous, we need to let the authorities know. We also need to do our part to make sure that we're having debates. We can have it aggressively based on the issues, but make sure that it's kept to the issues and keeping the personal out of it, because the consequences now are getting way too tragic.
And we're talking about Pennsylvania. Of course, we also saw the assassination attempt on President Trump in Pennsylvania. Do you worry about the safety of candidates campaigning, of people going to see them at rallies, or, as in the case with Charlie Kirk, not even a candidate, but just somebody taking part in political dialogue?
I do. Look, I do. And not that I want anything to happen, so I want to be clear, but at least presidents and governors have some level of security. When you have a situation like with Charlie Kirk, you've got thousands of young people there to hear him. And maybe there was a couple private security guards, but it's nothing like having the United States Secret Service. So if the United States Secret Service wasn't able to stop an assassination attempt on, at that time, a former president, now President Trump, then it does show you the vulnerability of some of these. But at the end of the day, we all want to have open, free dialogue and enjoy our freedoms that we all love in this country. So we've got to find a better way, because, again, you can't have United States Secret Service or military style or even sometimes local law enforcement protection at all of these events. Look, I teach at the University of Pittsburgh. It's an open campus. I grew up in that neighborhood. I think that's one of the best parts about Pitt. It's an open campus. We have these type of discussions all the time, and it's great. And it's part of the academic world, and it's something that I want all young people to be able to experience. These type of events that happened to Charlie Kirk tragically make them less likely, because I know safety protocols are now going to have to be put in place.
Are there specific things that you would like to see happen or that you're going to look into now regarding security?
Well, when it comes to our own staff with the party, certainly we're going to take safety protocols, but it's also going to be something that anytime there's a rally in Pennsylvania, and certainly when it's my side of the aisle, I'm going to be recommending candidates do have some form of security there. I've done it at events I've done. Again, I want people to come, even people that disagree, but you've got to at least have some level of security there, even if it costs more money, even if the parties have to pay for it, because people's safety is paramount.
I'm going to take a turn and look ahead to your new term as chair of the Pennsylvania Democratic Party. You are taking over at a time when Democrats in Pennsylvania, they lost a Senate race, they lost a vote for president in Pennsylvania. What do you plan to do to turn things around for Democrats in Pennsylvania?
I think we've got to do a better job of listening and a better job talking about our core values, particularly as it pertains to the economy. Look, I think this past November, people were frustrated and felt that the Democratic Party had lost touch with various parts of our coalition. People that were telling us over and over again that these rising prices were impacting their daily lives, and I don't think we put enough of an agenda on their plate to let them know that we heard them and that we were going to do something about it. And the voters rebelled against that. And I think we've got to do a better job reaching back out to those communities. I'm going to be having listening tours across the state, reaching out to those communities, and also trying to refocus the party on the economic struggles of so many Pennsylvanians. These rising prices are continuing under President Trump. Manufacturing jobs we've lost 80,000 manufacturing jobs during the first couple months of the Trump administration. And the economy is really struggling, and people that are paycheck to paycheck are really hurting. We've got to let them know that we hear them and put real ideas on the table on how we would turn this economy around if and when we are back in power.
You were not the chair in 2024, so I won't ask you to critique specific candidates, but you were a candidate and you lost in 2024. What did you do wrong?
I think it was a collective we. So we did not do, and I myself didn't do enough job of listening, and certainly like the Lehigh Valley, parts of Philadelphia, and even Erie, where I think we could have been more present earlier in listening to those folks and making sure that we had that we had ideas on the table to address their concerns. That was something, I've been specifically critical of one decision, but it's just a symbol for other items. And that was while Kamala Harris was campaigning with Liz Cheney in the Philadelphia suburbs, Donald Trump was talking about cutting taxes for people that are on Social Security and are tip earners. Now, again, protecting democracy was critical, and that's one of the reasons why I ran for Attorney General. But it was obvious that enough people were concerned not just about democracy, but that the democracy we have isn't working for them because of their economic struggles. And they specifically wanted to hear us addressing those economic struggles, and we didn't do enough, and myself included.
If you look at how the choices that people are making when they're registering to vote in Pennsylvania, I'm sure you know that Democrats are not keeping pace to where they were before. A smaller percentage of people are choosing to be Democrats when they register to vote in Pennsylvania. Is that a concern to you? Do you care about just how they vote, or are you worried about how they register as well? And if so, what do you do about it?
Well, how people vote politically is the most important, but certainly the registration is an indicator. So here's where my take on this. First of all, the largest growing block of voters in Pennsylvania are not affiliated. That means there's probably pretty clear frustration with both major political parties. So there's two things we need to do. As Democrats, we need to do a better job of registering people to our party. So that's number one. But number two is, I think that is only part of the problem, and that is an effort on it. But we've also got to do a job of making people think Democrats are fighting for them. If they believe the party is fighting for them, I think some of the registration concerns will be fixed. But we've got to do both. Put more effort into the registration and make sure that people know we're fighting for them. We've got to do both.
Do you think that independent, unaffiliated voters should be able to vote in primaries in Pennsylvania?
I actually introduced legislation on that when I was a legislator. So that was obviously several years ago now. And I do.
You're the chair now, though.
Yeah, I do strongly believe that as the Democratic Party chair, that non-affiliated voters should be able to vote in primaries. That is not an official party position, but that is my position. And that's something I'm going to work to get more people in my party for, because I think it's the right thing to do for the Democratic Party, but I also think it's the right thing to do for voters across the state. We should be empowering more voters, not less.
I talked to the DNC chair, Ken Martin, this summer. He indicated to me that we're going to see the DNC getting involved in some things we might not expect, smaller races like school board races, for example. Does that go for the state party as well? Do you plan on getting, super local with the state party?
Our number one priority this November is our judicial races, particularly retaining our 3 Supreme Court justices. That is the number one priority. So I'm not going to say that those other races aren't going to have party involvement, but the number one priority is our judicial retention, voting yes for our Supreme Court justices. And people should vote yes because the nonpartisan Pennsylvania Bar Association has recommended voting yes. They are the ones that are fighting to make sure that we have fair funding in our schools, to hold down property taxes and getting more money into our schools so that every child in Pennsylvania has an equal opportunity at a quality education. And they're also standing up for reproductive freedom. So the vote yes for our Supreme Court justices is the number one priority of the party this fall.
Judicial retention races, those are a challenge to reach voters with, especially because they don't have a choice between this person and that person. Right. You have to sort of explain how it works first. Do you think this is really just going to end up being a turnout situation, whichever side can get more turnout?
It may be, but that's also why I'm doing interviews like this, to let people know why they should vote yes. It's not just because they're Democrats. I actually think that there should be retention yes votes across the board. Some of them, in other judicial positions are Republicans, some are Democrat, but I think we should vote yes across the board. I don't think these should be partisan affairs, but these justices that are up for retention this fall have shown a balanced perspective on upholding the law, standing up for equal rights across the board, and fair education funding and reproductive freedom. And that's, I believe, something that all Pennsylvanians should embrace.
I want to ask you about something that Pennsylvanians and folks in the Philadelphia area have been hearing an awful lot about recently. There's been a lot of drama in recent weeks over SEPTA and transit. I know in Pittsburgh that has also been an issue as well. Recently, Governor Shapiro signaled a bit of a change after approving SEPTA to use some capital money that it asked to use. He says he now expects to see a budget deal that does not include recurring funding for mass transit. That's something he'd been pushing for. It's something Democrats had been advocating for. How do Democrats now go to voters in the Philadelphia region, for example, and explain why you didn't get that recurring funding?
Yeah, so for starters, I know how important SEPTA is. My daughter is a recent Temple grad, and she rides the bus every day to go to work now. So I know how important SEPTA is to get people across the state. And look, I think that we've got to go back and start talking about transit as a statewide issue. So it's important, it's critical for the southeastern part of the state, but it's critical for all Pennsylvanians. I think we've got to do a better job of explaining to voters in every single aspect of this state how it's important to get people to work, help seniors get to the pharmacy, to make sure that we have less congestion and traffic on our roads, and it helps get people to work. And this is in every single corner of our state. And if we don't have a quality transit system, our economy across the state will shut down. So we've got to make sure we're making the case, not just in the southeastern part of the state, but in every single part of the state. So the governor is going to do the right thing here by making sure that SEPTA continues its operations, by dipping into that fund, but it is not a long-term solution. And going into the next budget, I think it's critical that they find a long-term solution.
But you could have gotten it this time, and you didn't. How do you explain that?
Yeah, look, the Senate Republicans clearly were roadblocks on this. They didn't feel enough political pressure to do it, and we've got to make sure that that changes by showing specifically how transit is critical, not just in southeastern Pennsylvania, but in their own communities as well. In Indiana County, for example, in Cambria County, in Blair County, transit is critical, but and in Westmoreland County, transit is critical, but legislative leaders on the Republican side in those areas didn't feel the pressure. We've got to make sure that changes by making sure they hear from their constituents, not just talking about SEPTA, which is critical, but also making sure that that we hear from their constituents in their communities of how transit is critical for them as well.
Before I let you go, I want to ask you about one other local race, the race for district attorney in Philadelphia. We have a rematch between DA Larry Krasner and former Judge Pat Dugan, who ran in the Democratic primary and is now running as a Republican. What do you think about the ability to do that?
I'm not a fan of it. I mean, look, first of all, Larry, the district attorney, won the primary, won it convincingly. He's won his previous elections all convincingly. Look, people have the right to run. And if somebody runs in the primary, I mean, we've seen this in other areas of the state, they shouldn't be able to just turn around and then run under another party banner in the fall. Now, I get that this happened through a write-in, so it's, it's illegal and it's a loophole. But I believe the voters will see through this and Larry will be reelected.
Pennsylvania State Democratic Party Chair Eugene DePasquale, thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate your time. Look forward to talking to you again.
My pleasure, Laura. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
That does it for this episode of Battleground Politics. You can find more of my interviews on NBC10.com, the NBC10 app, our NBC Philadelphia YouTube page, or you can listen on the go. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.